This is a wild season. Goes without saying the amount of time the teams have been off, age on some players, recuperatory time for other players. What do you expect to see, DT? I mean, I will say I wouldn't at all be surprised, and I've said this on the show quite a bit over the last few weeks, that we could be getting to week 6 or week 7 of this season and be talking about a whole group of new stars or impact players that right now, to be honest, aren't really household names amongst even people that follow the CFL very closely.
Yeah, and I think those stars would be on offense. I mean, I expect both the offense and defense are going to be behind, right? Because you don't have 2 preseason games. You just have 20, whatever it is, days of practice. Mistakes in games made by defensive backs are going to be so much more costly. Receiver runs the wrong route. Okay, well, Fajardo or Colaros just throws it into the dirt and it's 2nd and 10. Defensive back makes a wrong read, 85-yard touchdown. I think multiple 80-yard touchdowns in week number 1. I think it's heavy in the overs with high-scoring games because mistakes by defense, I think, in my mind, is just going to be punished early on in the season, and they'll eventually correct that. But any team that's incorporating new dudes in the defensive backfield, like the Bombers, I just think there's going to be mistakes, and if the quarterbacks spot them, and the points are just going to rack up. We saw high scores early in the NFL. I don't think there's any reason there's not the same in the CFL this year.
Going to be taking a lot of overs early on when we're doing our weekly picks in the CFL. Speaking of picks, looking at the odds for the season, Hamilton and Winnipeg, the 2 teams that, of course, we last saw playing for the Grey Cup, seem to have the most continuity from very good rosters in 2019, but there's been a long time. Do you buy the Bombers and Ticats as the sort of respective favorites in their 2 divisions, Derek? Or is this all just based on what we had before and anything can happen?
So I think Hamilton has run away the tops in the East. I think they're the best roster in the Canadian Football League. They'll have to deal with interceptions from whichever quarterback they choose, but I think Hamilton looks fantastic, and the continuity in their coaching staff, to me, puts them number 1. Winnipeg got so many of its players back. There's still the question about what happens when Zach Colaros gets hit, and that's going to last until Zach Colaros gets hit and then pops right back up. I think the West is really tight with Winnipeg, Saskatchewan, and Edmonton's roster. What they've done, oof, man, Edmonton's my choice to be the most improved team. And when I saw them early on at 11-1, 10-1 to win the Grey Cup, I had to jump on that because I look at that and go, ooh, it's Trevor Harris. It's receivers he knows. They added Darrell Walker. It's an offensive coordinator / head coach that he knows. Offensive line, they improved their defensive backfield with street free agents. There's not a level of that team that I don't think is really good. And James Wilder, 20-1 to win the rushing title for a team I think might win 9 or 10 or 11 games. Well, 11's a lot in the West. 10 games potentially. I think Edmonton is the team to watch. Then it's to me, Calgary and BC kind of round out the West. If there's a crossover, to me, it's going to be one of those 2. But yes, Saskatchewan, Winnipeg, Edmonton, to me, at this moment, barring 4 more injuries on a single day for one of these teams, will compete for tops in the West.
You mentioned some of these preseason odds and props. It was interesting when the passing leaders odds came out. Mm-hmm. Trevor Harris initially was listed at like 11-1. And I know you had spoken about that. And not surprisingly, that number has cratered big time. He's just over 6-1 on a couple books right now. But I mean, Harris, the guy, he's passed for 5,000 yards. He's in an offense that seems to be built exactly for that. I'm not sure whether this was, the book saying, oh, we got to see what happens, how he worked at his new spot. But I mean, a very established CFL quarterback that, was in a situation, I think, pretty conducive to offense.
Oh, I'm with you 100%. So I jumped on that on day 1. Like it's nuts. And I think a lot of the books just kind of looked at the stats from last year. Like McLeod Bethel Thompson's odds were shorter than Trevor Harris. MBT's not even a starter in the league right now, right? So I think they looked at the numbers from 2019 and said, okay, here's our odds. But Trevor Harris, like you said, 11-1. It's now a little over 6-1. And I just want to point people to, I know BC was troubled in 2019, but Mike Riley was the leading passer in the CFL in 2016, 17, and 18. And you can still get him at 7-1. That line hasn't moved, 7.5-1. Honestly, you pick those 2 and just call it a day because you're gonna have profit on in December. I don't know. Fajardo maybe in the Jason Moss system, but Saskatchewan likes to run the football too. I think if you don't get on Harrison Riley, you're missing out a lot.
Hey, are people sleeping on Bo Levi Mitchell? And I guess a big part of what's happened in Calgary is that, for a change, there is so many new faces at key offensive positions, but they've still got the guy under center that gets it done.
Yeah, Bo's not a huge yardage total guy, though, right? So when it comes to leading passer, I put him down. Man, they've been whacked on the offense between running back, replacing Canadian guards, and then, oh, by the way, Neela Casatati, the right tackle, retired this week. Kamar Jordan is back, but Aaron Peck's a guy who was expected to play this season. He's retired. So now Josh Huff, and I mean, whatever you think, Hergy Mayala might be the leading Canadian receiver in the league, but is Hergy Mayala Brandon Banks in waiting? Is he Brian Burnham in waiting? Let's not go too far there. I think Bo's one of those guys who always gets me in fantasy or in when I pick him in over-unders, because sometimes he'll go for 4, and then a lot of times it's, we're in the 2s and they just win the game anyway, but it doesn't require a ton from Bo. So when it came to the prop bets, I just kind of pushed him to the side.
DT, I got to ask you about our old pal Paul Appolise. How much of an uphill grind are the Red Blacks going to have this season?
Oh, I've taken so much flack for that, but it was interesting to see some of the comments from the Red Blacks yesterday of basically acknowledging that, you know what, we got a lot of work to do. Our roster, we need to fill some holes, because one, to me, the roster wasn't particularly good to start with, and then 2, the retirements they got hit with in critical spots were amazing. Sinopoli, gone. Oh, here's 2 Canadian offensive linemen, our starting center and the guy we expected to start if that guy couldn't start, gone. Boundary halfback, Corey Tyndall, gone. How could a team, Jalen Saunders, of course, that terrible car crash. So he is retired / hoping to come back. That is the 9th best roster in the CFL. And I don't know who's 8th, but I know Ottawa is the 9th best roster in the CFL. And I think Lapo is a great play caller. I think he does great things with scheme to maximize talent. And I love Mike Benavides as the defensive coordinator. But to me, CFL and winning games in CFL is about quality players, and I do not see it in Ottawa at all. So 3.5 wins, are they getting there? Yeah.